The moment those blue lights hit your rearview mirror, everything changes. Your hands tighten on the wheel, your mind starts racing. You check your speed, your mirrors, your surroundings. Too late. The siren chirps once, sharp and final. You're being pulled over. And in that split second, whether you realize it or not, a chain of decisions begins, some yours, some the officer's, that can completely shape how this encounter ends. Have you ever been in a traffic stop where something felt off, like the officer was pushing too hard, asking too much, or not following the rules? Drop your experience in the comments, because what you've seen or gone through might be more important than you think. And there's something most drivers don't realize about these situations that I'll break down as we go. Let's get into something people don't talk about enough. Not every traffic stop goes the way it's supposed to. And sometimes, the person who exposes that isn't the driver. It's another officer. That's exactly what happened in a case that shook a department from the inside. A cop didn't get caught because of a civilian complaint. He didn't get disciplined because of a viral video. He got fired because his own partner, someone sitting right next to him, decided something wasn't right. Now think about that for a second. Officers work in pairs for a reason. There's trust, coordination, shared responsibility. But there's also observation. And when that observation turns into concern, things can unravel quickly. Picture this scenario. Late evening, moderate traffic. A vehicle gets pulled over for what seems like a minor violation, maybe drifting slightly within the lane, maybe a delayed signal. Nothing dramatic. The kind of stop that happens thousands of times a day across the country. The officer approaches the vehicle. Standard posture, controlled tone. Do you know why I pulled you over? That question right there, it's more strategic than most drivers realize. It's not just about the violation. It's about watching how you respond. Do you hesitate? Do you over-explain? Do you contradict yourself? Officers are trained to observe behavior as much as they enforce the law. Now here's where things start to shift. The driver gives a simple answer, calm, neutral, no admission, no argument, just acknowledgement. But the officer doesn't move on. Instead, he repeats the question, slightly different tone. Are you sure you don't know why I stopped you? That repetition is intentional. It's pressure. It's designed to get you talking more than necessary. And a lot of drivers fall into that trap. They start filling the silence. They start guessing. And suddenly, what could have been a straightforward stop becomes a fishing expedition. But in this case, something else is happening. The partner in the passenger seat is watching, listening, not just to the driver, but to the officer, because there's a line, and experienced officers know exactly where that line is. The questioning continues. It stretches longer than it should. The officer starts asking unrelated questions. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed tonight? Is this your vehicle? Now let's be clear about something. Officers can ask questions. That's not the issue. The issue is context. The issue is purpose. And the issue is escalation without cause. When a stop for a minor traffic violation suddenly turns into a prolonged interrogation without clear justification, that's when things start to raise eyebrows, especially for someone sitting right there in the patrol car. And here's something most drivers don't realize. Officers are constantly evaluating each other, even if it's subtle. They notice tone changes. They notice when a stop drags on. They notice when questions don't match the situation. Now imagine being that partner. You're sitting there, watching your colleague push harder than necessary. The driver is compliant. Documents have been handed over. There's no visible threat, no clear sign of criminal activity. But the stop continues. The officer holds onto the driver's license longer than needed. That's another detail people overlook. The longer your documents are held, the longer the stop is effectively extended. And while there are legitimate reasons for that, running checks, verifying information, there are also situations where it's used to buy time. Time for what? More questioning, more observation, sometimes even waiting for backup or a canine unit. Now let's pause here, because this is where many drivers unintentionally make things worse. When a stop feels like it's dragging, people get nervous. They start asking questions like, "Am I free to go?" But they say it with tension, frustration, or even sarcasm. That tone matters more than the words themselves. Officers are trained to read emotional shifts. If your voice tightens, if your hands start moving more, if you look away too quickly, it can be interpreted in ways you didn't intend. And that's where things spiral. Back to the scenario. The officer asks the driver to step out of the vehicle. Now legally, yes, officers can ask drivers to step out during a traffic stop. That's been upheld for officer safety. But again, context matters, timing matters, and most importantly, reasoning matters, even if it's not always explained in the moment. The driver hesitates, just slightly, and that hesitation becomes the pivot point. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." The tone changes, firmer, less conversational. The partner notices it immediately, because now, what started as a routine stop is turning into something else. And here's where things take a turn that most people never see. The partner speaks up. Not loudly, not confrontationally, but enough. "Hey, what's the probable cause here?" That question, simple, direct, isn't just about the driver. It's about accountability. Inside law enforcement, probable cause and reasonable suspicion aren't just legal terms. They're boundaries. And when those boundaries start to blur, it creates risk, not just for the civilian, but for the officer and the department. The officer pauses, just for a moment. And that pause says everything. Because now, it's not just about the stop anymore. It's about justification. It's about whether the actions being taken can actually be defended later, in reports, in court, or under internal review. And here's the part that most drivers never realize. A lot of what happens during a traffic stop isn't judged in real time. It's judged afterward. Bodycam footage gets reviewed. Reports get analyzed. Supervisors look for inconsistencies. And when another officer raises a concern during the stop itself, that carries weight. The stop eventually ends. The driver is released. No ticket, no arrest. Just confusion and a story they'll probably tell for years. But for the officer, the story is just beginning, because that partner didn't forget what happened. A report gets filed. Maybe not immediately, maybe after a shift, but it happens. And now the department starts asking questions. Why did the stop last that long? Why were those questions asked? What justified the escalation? And here's where things start to fall apart. Because when you're asked to explain your actions, especially in law enforcement, you need more than instincts. You need articulation. You need clear, lawful reasoning. "I had a feeling" doesn't hold up. "I thought something was off" isn't enough. There has to be something specific, something observable, something that can be clearly explained. And when that's missing, it becomes a problem. The partner's account adds another layer, because now it's not just the officer's version. It's a second perspective, from someone trained, experienced, and present at the scene. That changes everything. Internal investigations aren't quick, they're detailed. They go through footage, radio logs, timing, even the smallest interactions. And what they found in this case wasn't just a one-time issue. It was a pattern. Similar stops, similar questioning, similar lack of clear justification. That's when departments start making decisions that aren't about one incident, but about risk, liability, and trust. And eventually, the outcome becomes unavoidable. The officer is terminated, not because a driver complained, not because a video went viral, but because someone on the inside said, "This isn't right." Now let's bring this back to you, because there's a reason this matters beyond just one story. Traffic stops are one of the most common interactions between civilians and law enforcement, but they're also one of the most misunderstood. People think it's just about following instructions and getting it over with. And yes, compliance matters, but awareness matters just as much. You need to understand what's normal and what's not. You need to recognize when a stop is staying within its purpose and when it's drifting. And most importantly, you need to know how your own behavior can influence the direction of that stop. Because here's the truth. Most situations don't escalate because of one big mistake. They escalate because of a series of small ones. Talking too much, getting defensive too quickly, moving too suddenly, answering questions you don't fully understand, or sometimes just trying too hard to be cooperative in a way that actually creates suspicion. That's the part that surprises people. Over-explaining can be just as risky as refusing to speak. Why? Because it creates inconsistencies. It gives more information than necessary, and it opens doors for further questioning. Now, that doesn't mean you should be silent in a way that feels confrontational. There's a balance. And finding that balance is what separates a smooth interaction from a complicated one. Officers are trained to look for baseline behavior, calm, consistent, predictable. When that baseline shifts, even slightly, it draws attention. So if you're calm one moment and suddenly agitated the next, it raises questions. If you answer simply at first but then start adding details later, it creates curiosity. And curiosity, during a traffic stop, often leads to more questions. That's how situations expand. And once they expand, it becomes harder to bring them back to something simple. That's why cases like this matter, because they show that the system isn't just about authority, it's also about accountability. Officers are expected to follow procedures just like civilians are expected to follow laws. And when those procedures aren't followed, it doesn't always take an outside force to expose it. Sometimes it comes from within. But don't rely on that. Don't assume there will always be a partner willing to speak up. Your awareness is your first line of defense. Knowing how stops typically unfold gives you a reference point. It helps you recognize when something feels off, not emotionally, but logically. And when you combine that awareness with controlled, deliberate behavior, you reduce the chances of things going sideways. Because at the end of the day, a traffic stop is a controlled environment, but it's also unpredictable. Two people, two perspectives, one moment that can go in multiple directions depending on what happens next. So the next time you see those lights in your mirror, remember this. It's not just about pulling over safely. It's about how every word, every pause, every reaction shapes what comes next. And sometimes, the most important thing happening during that stop isn't what's being said to you. It's what's being noticed by someone else entirely.